Good morning, everyone, rather. I'm getting way ahead of my time here, and I haven't even traveled abroad. Welcome to this panel discussion on big data and tech, although we will be dipping into lots of different areas of that. The global economy is going through rapid, accelerated change, as we know. More than 30 billion devices, they're going to be connected. That's estimated by 2020. We're not too far away from that date. Some of us have made our vacation plans way beyond 2020. These networks, they generate extensive data. They yield insights into consumers, into what we want and how we want it delivered. But not everybody quite understands the terms or the definitions related to that. We're going to have a good discussion about just what it all means and in relation to the various sectors that my distinguished panel are experienced in. So to kick it off, we are seeing rates of profiling and hyper-personalization like never before. It means a lot to different businesses, but let's go straight to Cassie from Google for an understanding of what artificial intelligence perhaps means in relation to that. Cassie.
Thank you, Dawn. Yes, so in order to personalize with data, you tend to turn to machine learning and AI. And unfortunately, to a lot of people, that seems to be synonymous with a magical box of magic, which does make you miss opportunities where you could otherwise have made excellent use of AI and machine learning. So instead, what you should think of it as, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, is as a thing labeler, where you're going to label things using examples. Now, with traditional programming, what you do is you write the instructions for getting the task done explicitly. With machine learning, you express yourself with examples plus an objective instead of explicit instructions. And AI, the way that the word is used today, actually tends to mean deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning. So, in other words, thing labeling with examples, a mode of expression that we already have. And what this has to do with personalization is that if you're going to write instructions explicitly yourself, how are you going to think of everything and everybody's needs? I mean, you yourself as a programmer, you don't have the memory for that, you don't have the understanding. But if you can instead use examples, and examples in terms of big data collected, and you use those to express what you want, then you can now have solutions which far exceed the imagination of any team of human programmers. So it's really exciting, incredible stuff. And Ari, you were just talking to me earlier about some hyper-personalization.
Yes, thanks, Cassie. I think what I'd really like to share here is, before I address the issue of hyper-personalization and profiling, I'll spend a minute or so on the journey that Mastercard has been on. Over the last 50 years, we've really seen our role as custodians of civil society, as we've enabled electronic payments on a global platform scale. And at the heart of that, the trust doctrine has been really high. And what do I mean by that? The fact that we can travel across continents and take a piece of plastic out from our pockets and use it at some merchant, and the consumer knows exactly what he or she is going to get charged. The merchant knows exactly what they will get paid, and the financial institutions in the middle are completely secure and trusting the fact that their books will be settled in the right way. Now, in that environment, we think that the next wave of growth that's going to come in this, hyper-personalized environment that we are moving to, we think that we have a real opportunity where we can take the trust doctrine to the next level. And what we are really doing here is we're using the latest cutting-edge technologies and artificial intelligence, where the old belief that consumer ease and convenience is naturally antithetical to safety and security. Therefore, let's add more roadblocks and friction to the consumer experience, we're blowing that out of the water. So what we are really doing, AI is really informing our ability to do the magic in the back end. And I'll use a very real example is the way I use my mobile device, the way I press the buttons, the errors I make, the pressure I put, the tilt that I have on my mobile device, all of this is creating a unique footprint of who I am. And therefore, you can imagine this is AI on steroids, our ability to judge a unique consumer and therefore hyper-personalize that experience by eliminating friction and not create roadblocks is the journey that we're really very excited about. And you're going to see this coming out. This is not, we're not talking space age stuff. This is real and it's getting rolled out globally.
So I'll take off from where Ari left and where Cassie introduced the topic. I think when you look at financial inclusion and we look at the traditional ways of lending, I think they are very antiquated. And if you look at in the US, you use traditional scoring. And if I were to use traditional scoring, almost 30, 40 million Americans would not be able to get access to credit. So our mission at the company that I work for is to democratize access to affordable credit. And exactly as you laid out, you define the examples of borrowers that meet your criteria, and then you use AI and machine learning to figure out how closely you match that profile. You're not writing thousands of lines of code. You are laying out a set of behavioral patterns that you want your ideal consumer to fit, and then you are discovering them in an iterative process, getting better and better over time. If you look at this region, Indonesia is, I would think, only 14 or 20% is banked. So those models, let's take our typical customer is an employee in Sinar Mas, right? And he's got a weekly paycheck and he's stably earning income, but doesn't have a score. So my traditional model would have meant that his application comes in and we reject him because we have no background on him. On the other hand, if we have information about a stable income stream that he's enjoying, and you appropriately manage that model against that AI model that you described, then he's perfectly valid credit. And then you can give him a loan, he can get on with his business, he can purchase that motorcycle that will enable him to have a better life, and so on and so forth. So I think the hyper-personalization is really, we are seeing, working really well in these models, and consistent with the theme of this conference, bringing financial inclusion, bringing a lot of demonstrable benefits to the consumers.
Yeah, and a lot of the burden taken off of you, because really what this means is you can now focus on outcomes.
Correct.
Clear outcomes that you can see. What happened here? Clear inputs of what was true at that time, and the middle bit.
Yes.
You don't have to agonize over that yourself anymore.
Right.
So there's lots of potential, and I like what you were saying, and in the other panel they were talking about financial inclusion as well, democratizing wealth. You don't have to have lots and lots of money in order to begin making more money. You don't have to just to sort of gamble on it anymore. But along with that, you need lots of data. That's at the basis of all of this. And with such a massive amount of data, it needs to be analyzed. It needs to be looked at very carefully. And we need the training to be able to do that. I can say, I've got all of these ingredients, as you say, Cassie. What do I do with these ingredients in order to make good business decisions? What are we seeing in that sphere? Ari?
Well, I think it's like when a consumer goes to a restaurant, they don't want to know how you cooked the meal. So I think what you really have to think about is technology for the sake of technology actually means nothing. You really have to start with consumer journeys. You really have to start with a problem statement, a pain point, and as long as you focus on those and then let the technologist solve for what is needed at the sharp end of a business opportunity, I think you'll see magic happen through that. We've talked about financial inclusion. We as a company took a target of enabling 500 million consumers into the financial inclusion net, and honestly, we had no idea how we were going to get there. We've got to 360. There's still a journey to go. But at the heart of this, what we are seeing is that the shifts in technology and the cost of technology access is going down dramatically. Whether it is the telecom infrastructure, whether it is smart devices, your ability to work with, like Google Cloud, and really have the ability to create business models which are able to survive and thrive is the next wave of where innovation is really going to come from. And you have a real opportunity where I think not just here in Asia, but it's a global phenomena of bringing more people and businesses and SMEs to the formal economy as opposed to where they've traditionally have been in the informal space where access to credit and others, as DK you were mentioning, comes at an exorbitant price. Right. And there's a clear arbitrage, not just for society, but also for businesses.
I'll take a little bit of a technology take on what Ari said. The data, as you said, is growing and is there, but how much of that is actually usable? How much of that is lying untapped, latent in organizations? How much of that can be combined with data that is outside to the system? So I think there is a lot of opportunity in how we bring disparate data together. Because without that, your AI models and all the like are only garbage in, garbage out. I was talking about it yesterday, but the quality of the data and the availability of the data, the timeliness of the data, they are all sometimes taken for granted and they are not. And I think a lot of organizations just go in to AI modeling and machine learning only to realize that they don't have any data, which then ultimately leads to disasters.
Do you know, some of this stuff, I think, comes from the way that folks are educated in machine learning, AI, big data. And they are educated towards research. Now, the applied side of this stuff versus the research side, I like to liken it to the difference between building new microwaves from scratch, it's making general purpose tools for other people to solve business problems with, that's the research side, and then the actual cooking in a kitchen at scale, making real stuff for real consumers, that's the applied side and the business side. So if you have spent your whole life being trained in 10 years of education with a PhD eventually to build microwaves, right? Algorithms. That is where you will start thinking. And so when you're hired, the first thing that you are going to want to do is make a microwave. If the existing tools are there already, and actually you're making pizza and you need ovens, what on earth are you building this microwave for? So starting with algorithms, starting with things that sound fancy, like neural networks, because that sounds fancy, really bad approach for the applied side. But then people think, okay, then if not algorithms, maybe we should start with data. Now that is a mistake as well. And that's the sort of attitude that you'll have if you were trained for business intelligence or analytics, maybe even statistics. You love data, that's your focus, so that's where you want to leap in. But data is ingredients in a kitchen. Don't just start running around grocery stores playing with ingredients.
Yes.
And using ingredients for their own sake. Here's a mushroom, let's see what we can do with it. The place to start is your customers.
Correct.
What do you want to feed them? What is your business going to be based on? What sorts of dishes do you want to make? And the people qualified to think about that stuff, they are the business people. And that's what you have to think about before you go run around in ingredients, data, before you go and get microwaves, algorithms. So that's the order you want to start in. What are the outputs? What's this thing producing? Why is this worth doing? How do we know if it works? And only then you move to data. And then only then you move to algorithms. And what I see is people do it in the opposite order, and they keep failing over and over.
So why that is happening? The reason I think is that the business people who are thinking of these journeys either don't have access to data or don't have access to the algorithms. So one of the things which I think this conference and is launching tomorrow, and I think is really, really a key enabler, is that this is platform that is being launched where fintechs who are, let's say, building the best-in-class models and the banks are providers of some of the data, and they're being brought together to sort of put together this sauce, if you will, so the business can cook it together, right? So they can take the best-in-class models with their data. So the platform enables the data to be delivered, and the platform allows access to the best-in-class models so that the business or the cook has the ability to really, deliver his recipe.
So I agree with you, but I want to push back against you just ever so slightly. That mode of thinking still supposes that the business person is going to wash their hands of this and hand it all off. And what I'm saying is that before they've taken that moment to be creative, to think about what would they do if they didn't have to worry about the magic and the
Yes.
math and the data?
Yeah.
If they don't do that step first,
Yeah.
then there's a problem. And when you do that step first, then once you know what you want to make and why you want to make it,
Right.
then you look around and all of a sudden you see that when you thought you didn't have data, when you thought you didn't have algorithms, actually that's a lot more available. But when you don't even know what's worth doing in the first place, everything looks mysterious.
Yeah, I just want to underscore what Cassie has just said is, we are at a fintech festival, right, and a conference. And it's great to see all the new technologies and capabilities and startups that are coming in. I think I would strongly urge is resist the temptation to build solutions and then look for the problem that it addresses. Be very clinical and step back and stick with first principles. Have a really good sense of your consumers, of the problem that you're really trying to solve, and then let technology, data, all these enablers become ingredients that addresses what the pain point and the solution you need. I think there's too often, and we see it a lot, I'm sure many of us will see the same thing. We see great companies, great people, but there's this obsession about the technology, about the analytics, without enough emphasis on what problem are you really trying to solve.
So Ari, you've mentioned there the issue of the pain points, and businesses in all sectors are feeling that. When you look at the amount of disruption, and that's something that we hear every day, don't we, that the environment is changing so rapidly, how does a business leader or an organization keep up with that? Having looked at what to analyze, they've analyzed it, they said, well, we kind of think this is what we need, depending on our sector. How do they address their biggest concerns? What concerns does Mastercard have, for example?
Well, I think, Dawn, it's a great question. I think we're still kind of learning. I think the one thing that we clearly have a deep appreciation of understanding is we've really got to be flexible to move with the changing times. Flexibility is going to be at a huge premium. Handling ambiguity is also going to remain at a huge premium. And what you can't have is, because you've got lots of data, lots of information, there is actually information and data overload. That can't become the driver for inaction. The challenge that you've rightly raised is the pace of change is moving at such a ferocious pace that if you look at historically, over the last 100, 150 years, from the industrial age to the information age, we've had reasonably long lengths of time to react. And you really have to see today, business models come up, in 12 months, 18 months have reached 100 million consumers. Whereas if you go back to the industrial age, it took us probably 50, 70 years to get to that level of scale. And that is, deeply, how do I put it? It's not concerning, it's exciting, but also it creates a lot of anxiety that how do you stay at the cutting edge of all developments, and that has implications on education, learning, reskilling, not just for larger parts of society, even for sophisticated companies where you make this continuous investment.
And I'd like to point out also that you will be more anxious, and probably rightly so, if you are attempting to reinvent every wheel in-house.
Yeah.
There are going to be lots and lots of solutions out there to solve your problem in a better way that your customers might really appreciate you plugging into your business. And if instead you say, no, we have to hire the team to do everything ourselves, well, of course you can't keep up with all those innovators out there whose primary business it is to build the solutions to serve you.
And I think that's the point of, again, which is to be really thought through. What enables or fosters a collaborative development environment, right? Because you can't do everything yourself. And if you insource everything, that'll be years before you do something, and by the time it'll be outdated anyway. So what's the ecosystem that allows you to collaborate with best in class and bring together a disruptive experience which improves your customers' journeys, bringing your business skills to the table and the best in class capabilities. So I think, and that's possible now. I mean, we use Google's TensorFlow in OCR recognition, and I don't have to worry about Google's TensorFlow works. I can take a document, scan it, automatically figure out, and I can create an identity solution. We did that. We are demonstrating at this conference. No idea of how the Google TensorFlow works, but it works really well.
And then the burden is on us who are serving that to you, that when the environment changes and there's a push for something is potentially better and competing with that, then it brings the burden to us to make sure that the solution that we're serving you is keeping up. So you don't have to worry about that, and you would if you were building it in-house.
Yeah, I want to second that. This partnership, collaboration has to be the theme of how you operate in this highly shifting and innovative environment that we are in. And it's hard. Companies' cultures and others, sometimes there's a lot of internal resistance to look outside, to do things different or work with external partners. The natural tendency for a lot of us is to say, oh, we can do this better than them. But you really have to define that, what type of speed do you need, access, you really have to create what the success criteria and then measure your ability to meet that, as opposed to just coming from a dogmatic view that because you are big or large, that you should be able to solve it better than anybody else.
I want to say thank you to Cassie for mentioning the phrase hire the team, because now we're talking about people, because you have to hire people. And that's something, when you bring it down to brass tacks, a lot of people are concerned about, right? The conversation has been, with all of this, what will be the impact on your teams? How can a company have a culture of something if you have to remain flexible all the time? Do you have a flexible culture? How do you hire? How does all of that sort of impact who is working for you? So Ari, you had some interesting ideas, because we were chatting about this before this session began. Do you have any concerns about how this is going to impact people on the ground?
Well, I think, Dawn, a couple of things. I think as far as your first part, which is how do you hire people, how do you create this collaborative work environment, I think that you really have to define your values well. And if you've got your values defined well, and if collaboration and partnership is part of the value system that you want people coming in, you're going to foster the right culture and therefore lead to the next generation of leaders that's going to come take more powerful jobs in the company. However, the bigger question for us as civil society is the level of change that we are seeing. What technology is really driving for us is, go through the industrial age. Governments, policymakers, others have had fairly reasonable lengths of time to react to change. I think the bigger challenge for society and governance is how quickly do you react to this very hyper-fast world that we are in, and does your policies on education, reskilling, bringing the next generation of capabilities faster into the education system as opposed to waiting. I know, Cassie, you were saying that you have to wait to a certain level in school or college to get exposed to certain things. How do you do that at a much earlier stage, I think is going to be the challenge as well as the opportunity.
Right. Yeah, I think something that you get used to seeing, particularly if you spend a lot of time in the tech space, is that innovation tends to come not from teams that have carbon copies of individuals who all look like the stereotypical worker that you expected to have success here. In AI and data science, in applying it, you would be surprised at how interdisciplinary that has to be. That's not 20 AI professors all with the same bow tie and lab coat and whatever it is that you're imagining. That is psychologists working with philosophers, working with computer scientists, working with domain experts who understand what that data actually means and what those examples are saying, working with business people, decision makers, and a whole lot more. The interdisciplinarity of these teams is only going to grow. So that the innovation will come from these sources that we don't even expect. And so the more that we try to plan on a single educational track that's going to be put you where you expect to be 10 years later, the more surprised and disappointed we'll be. I think that the more open we are and the more we train people to flexibly adapt to different scenarios, the more we will find that we are innovating.
I'll say something controversial. I think going by the way saying that how do you train your people, how do you bring them up, why not turn it upside down? Today, access to education is democratized. It's all out there. For people who say, give me education, give me tools, go to Coursera, go do a Google search. That's all there. you can learn Python on your own without any background, if you intended to, right? So I think to some extent in the new economy, people have to take, control over their own destiny. And I think the organizations would be well, um, you know, motivated to give that message, that shape up, or you're out. I mean, I don't think there is any mollycoddling of the message. If, in this age, if we can't use the tools, then when can we?
Exactly.
I mean, so at least that's what I think is the level.
I think DK has made a great point, and we can make organizational processes that drive that. One thing that we have done is we have said 2 hours of self-learning on a topic that is of interest to any employee, you should be doing every week. And find a way, find a topic that you're passionate about. It maybe has nothing to do with your day job. But if you don't build that culture, that you're creating that self-learning, and I completely agree with DK that it's all out there. Thanks to Google, you've got access to such terabytes of data and knowledge that I think we are grossly underutilizing today in the world.
They're certainly working very hard at Google. Ari, I want you to give me your take on, the ASEAN 2018, the 33rd meeting is taking place right now. And yesterday, an e-commerce agreement was signed, right? And DK, you mentioned about this growth of the new economy. In this region, we have seen that there are barriers, right? Logistical barriers, regulatory barriers, all of that stuff. We don't want to discuss that today necessarily, but this agreement is meant to wipe all of that away. Everyone's just going to agree that it's all going to work. Are you skeptical at all about that?
Well, I do want to applaud the fact that there is a step in the right direction. But I think I will wait to see what it actually means. We've seen many announcements. I do want to recognize the fact that it's a step in the right direction, but the devil's in the detail.
What needs to be done, though?
So here is the issue. We can't get excited about this hyper-connected world, which has tremendous opportunities for new businesses and lifting hundreds and hundreds of millions of people from low-income to middle-income society, and technology being that great leveler is going to enable that. But if you then think of policies which are restrictive, I again feel that many governments and stakeholders are obsessing about a solution first, and then they are running around trying to find the problem that the solution fits into. I would strongly urge is, define what your core objectives are, and then very selfishly, in your sovereign national interest, do things that drive success for you. In a hyper-connected world, I know Ravi Menon in his opening comments yesterday talked about data sharing as opposed to data localization. It is in absolute interest of every country to participate in this globally connected marketplace as opposed to necessarily creating barriers which only hurts them. I was talking about safety and security. If you create barriers where all you have is your national data to determine fraud and you divorce yourself from global fraud trends, that is not in any national interest. And we've seen how these trends there are enough evidence of these are really global challenges, and the cybercrime industry is probably not meeting in fancy halls like this, but trust me, they do meet in the dark web, and this is now cross-border. This is highly sophisticated, and therefore the onus on all of us as members of civil society, as custodians of civil society, we really should look at creating a more secure environment, and therefore policy frameworks need to cater to that as opposed to become a barrier.
So when you look at the future of disruption, right, and if we can look at a future of disruption, what advancements concern you at all? Maybe Cassie, you can jump in.
So what I'm really excited about in the future, and this is really the trend to watch, is how much better the tools are getting and how quickly they're getting better. What this means is that technologies that you formerly would have needed an advanced degree in, say, computer science just to use, you now might be able to use if you're an artist who doesn't know how to program at all. Now, that's really exciting. What that means is that we can expect more creativity because folks who are not traditionally from sectors that participate can now get into technological innovation. But it's also interesting from the perspective of gaining skills. You might have trained yourself to do something that was only difficult because the tools were bad. And then the tools become good. And then the only thing you're left with is your ideas and creativity, because you no longer need to go and wrangle all that code yourself. And I think that the pace of this tooling that's democratizing AI and data science technologies, the pace is really picking up, and it's getting put in everyone's hands. This also means maybe that some of the smaller players become competition for the bigger players.
Right.
So it's an exciting time.
And I actually hope that some of the smaller players use the technology to become competitors. I'll give you a personal example which bothers me like hell in the US, right? So I used to love taking my kids to the toy shop and have them experiment and buy some nice toys for them. You know, I love Amazon, but Amazon has killed that industry completely, right? So you can't buy a toy in any place now because it's just not available. Toys R Us is closed down. All of those toy stores are just gone, right? So how do businesses stay relevant and the core business doesn't get killed because they could not keep up with the technology? And somebody who could do technology completely changed the game. And consumers may not even know what this new model is, but now they are sucked into it, right? So there's some degree of that worry that I have that some of these technology advancements can create a business model which you may not fully understand or like, but you have no choice. So I think that's one. I think the other part which concerns me is that, yes, this data about me is going to a lot of places. And how do I stay in control? I mean, Europe has mandated GDPR, and many people have gone with a lot of grunt work and they're complying. But there has to be a better way of managing GDPR, managing consent-based data sharing, managing an ability to automatically revoke all the places from where I have my data. And I think that technology is probably there today, but we just have to sort of implement it. And we have to figure it out that it's kind of wired into the DNA as we deploy those solutions so that we don't have to go to a massive exercise that Europeans did and many others haven't done it yet. And it's a tremendous cost to the company. I'm sure Google spent a lot of money in being GDPR compliant, right? But why could we not build systems like that from get-go so that we don't have to incur that cost, so that I stay comfortable in sharing my data with people that I'm okay with on demand, but that doesn't work today.
Right. So we're in a way, it's backwards thinking a little bit. Let me bring that point out. I mean, all of us here are a certain age on the stage. I won't ask you to give details, but Cassie, you're probably the youngest. When you look at the human touch in this sphere, right? And we keep saying, we hear it. We're going to lose the human touch in the digital economy. It's all going to go. Nobody's going to be relevant anymore. Is it a generational thing? Do the younger generation even care? Is this something that it's like books? We were saying no one's going to read listen to an audible book or read a book online when they want the physical book.
So I actually think that sometimes folks are tempted to think about this in a slightly sideways way. There is no such thing as technology that is free of humans. That just sits in space, doesn't come from humans, and does things without a human touch. What technology actually is a lever for whoever made it and deployed it. So think of it as a much more massive human touch. The one programmer who coded that thing up is touching everybody that this thing is now affecting. Maybe not in the same room, but it is that person's intention, ideas, creativity, wishes that are then with you that allow you to have the audiobook on your phone. So to me, it is a human touch. It's just not in the same room as you.
Right. Does it matter?
I think there are areas where that human touch is required and should stay, and there are areas where human touch is being done because that's the only way to do business today. So I'll give an example. I come originally from India, and I think the entire demographics has been shaped by people working through the nights in call centers. They hate it. Anybody who does that work, he'll make up that I love my job and all, but I think working from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. is not necessarily the best thing to do. So how do we smartly automate that in a way that it can be done, in the US by a smart bot for 80% of the calls? I think that's a good thing because, you can get that done in a way that, when I do a Google search, I don't want a human being searching for me. It's a perfectly good experience, right? So how good can that technology be? If it's really good, it works well, I'm good with that. But there are some things for which I'll need to retain the human touch, like going to a toy store and buying my toy. So.
Well, societal change is inevitable. I would only add to all the comments here is that, the world has seen change on a continuous cycle. When computers came out, everybody said, all of us will be out of jobs. We've created other jobs. Yes. We've created millions of jobs. A lot of people said that the paper industry will be dead. I think, unfortunately, we've killed more trees since the advent of information services than ever before. So I think you're going to see different jobs, different industries come up. What is worrying is the pace of change. Yes. Is our policy-making framework, is the way we govern, is that going to move at the same pace as opposed to the industrial age when we've had more time to react? I think is going to be the real challenge.
Let me, before we wrap up this session, I just want to get your final thoughts about what excites you. I think, Cassie, you've touched upon it. What excites you about future trends?
I think this whole area of machine learning-enabled data management, data curation, using of data for immersive experiences, I am very excited by that. I am spending my days building technologies with them and bringing them to consumers with really good results at promoting financial inclusion. I think it's great, and I look forward to having it become mainstream, not just in the big banks, but in a lot of small, medium, large banks and insurance and the like across industry. So that's what excites me.
Cassie?
Well, I'm part of Google Cloud because of what I'm most passionate about, and that is putting tools in the hands of people from a wide variety of walks of life and making them able to participate in technological innovation, making it easy, building tools that really enable you without all those advanced degrees to do so much more. And that means a future of creative applications. We can't even imagine all the things that we're going to see when anyone can use technology to make themselves the architect of their dreams.
I think, Dawn, the whole world of connected devices and connected people, you're going to see a world of 30 billion, 60 billion. These are phenomenally huge numbers. And also the excitement of taking hundreds of millions of people and connecting them to the financial system and really creating economic prosperity over the next 50, 100 years is a really phenomenal opportunity for all of us, and that's what's exciting.
All right, and on that note, I have to wrap up this panel for this morning. It remains for me to thank, and if you would give a round of applause to my panelists, Mr. Ari Sarker, Cassie Kozyrkov, and DK Sharma. Thank you very much.
Thank you.